According to OLS 1982, not all humans read or learn to read. Among those who read, there are good readers and poor readers. Based on this observation, many experts argue that reading is not a natural language process, which can be acquired without instruction. While the reader's knowledge of language is recognized as an integral part of reading brain, reading is viewed as a skill that is learned. To my professor, Dr. Maldrico D. Valles, classmates, good day to one and all. I am Regine Otamor, your discussant for the topic Viewing Reading as a Skill, which is under Module 2 of Psychology of Reading. Hopefully, at the end of this discussion, we are able to gain meaningful learnings which will be useful in teaching our students effectively in terms of reading. Reading as skills. Do we consider reading as one of our skills? Majority of teachers take the position that reading involves a skills development process. That is, they are convinced that the successful acquisition of reading ability is heavily dependent on the acquisition of specific skills. Even in the classrooms and remedial reading instruction have traditionally relied on the skills development process. Teachers teach reading by helping students master a series of skills. And what are these skills? These skills are word recognition through phonics, structural analysis, context clues, and comprehension skills. The Basel reading series has been used almost universally to help students develop and apply these skills. For a grade level, the materials usually consist of a textbook and a workbook. The textbook contains the reading selections, while the workbook contains the skill exercises. Skills development that I have mentioned a while ago has three attributes that make it particularly appealing. And what are these three attributes? The first attribute is the skills essential for success in reading can be identified and described in a reasonably objective manner. This means that their development does not depend on any single set of methods or materials, nor is their development tied to any given grade or age level. This first attribute is also called as identifiable skills. The next attribute is the skills generally tend to be sequentially related. Take note, the title is the word sequential. That is, certain skills must be taught and mastered before others can be introduced. The third attribute, the skills are generalizable, except for a few unique skills peculiar to the language and taxonomy of specialized subject matter. The same skills are applicable in all subject or content areas. Let's go now to the global reading skills and sub-skills. Word identification and comprehension is the two most global reading skills according to OLS 1982. Others include study skills and vocabulary development and expansion, although vocabulary is sometimes integrated with comprehension. Word recognition skills or word identification or word attack, defined by the Literacy Information and Communication System as the ability of a reader to recognize written words correctly and virtually effortlessly. The next one is comprehension skills. When we say comprehension skills, we use strategies in order to develop this skill. A reader uses to construct meaning and retrieve information from a text. The next one is study skills. When we say study skills, these are an array of skills which tackle the process of organizing and taking in new information, retaining information, or dealing with assessments. Some examples are mnemonics, which aid the retention of lists of information, effective reading, concentration techniques, and efficient note-taking. So in order to develop the global reading skills and sub-skills, we should have to remember or to take note these 3 skills. Let us further discuss word recognition. Word recognition is a process by which students learn to identify words and word parts. It begins with an understanding that letters symbolize the sounds in words and progresses to the ability to understand complex and word parts and syllabication principles. But do you know that word recognition is a twofold process? In order to recognize a word, there should have a 2 process. The first, the recognition of printed symbols by some method so that the word can be pronounced. The second one, the attachment to or association of meaning with the word after it has been properly pronounced. Meaning to say, before the child can recognize a word, he or she must first recognize that from the printed symbols. Then after recognizing that, he or she may now pronounce that word. Then after pronouncing that word, or after he or she already pronounced that word, that's the time now that he or she can attach or associate meaning to the word that he or she pronounced. So that is the process. Okay? So now, let's proceed now to word recognition strategies for pronunciation. So what are the strategies that we are going to use in order to develop word recognition? Specifically for pronunciation of that word. When you read, you are intent on getting the message. You don't notice the individual letters, group of letters, or even every word. This is because you have become a fluent reader. However, when you stumble on an unfamiliar word, you become aware of the individual letters that are grouped together to form that word. You stop reading because the word has interfered with the message. The question is, do you remember what you do when a word interferes with your understanding of what you are reading? Perhaps the following exercise will illustrate. Let's read the following sentence. I like brass people. You should have stumbled on the nonsense word brass. Imagine that you do not know the brass is a nonsense word. What strategies could you use to pronounce the word independently? The first strategy that we are going to use is phonic analysis and synthesis. Let's define first the word phonics. When we say phonics, it is a decoding technique that is dependent on a student's ability to make the proper grapheme phoneme or letter sound correspondences. While analysis, it involves breaking down something into its component parts. Then synthesis, it involves building up the parts of something into a whole. So for example, the word rust. For analysis, break down rust into the blend BR and phonogram graphemic base OST. You have met the blend BR before in such words as brown and brick. You have met the phonogram OST before in such words as just and must. You therefore know that pronunciation of BR and OST. While in synthesis, blend together the BR and OST. Using this technique, you should be able to pronounce brust. The second strategy is whole word or look and say method. The whole word or look and say method has the teacher or any other individuals directing your attention to a word and then saying the word. You must make an association between the oral word and the written word and show this by actually saying the word. This technique is also called sight method. It helps you learn to pronounce words, but it will not help you figure out the pronunciation of unfamiliar words independently. Best example for this is showing a flashcard to our students or to our children. Children are repeatedly told the word name while being shown the printed word, perhaps accompanied by a picture. The third strategy is structural analysis and synthesis word parts. Structural analysis and synthesis involve the breaking down of words into word parts and the building up of word parts into words. Word parts are prefixes, suffixes, roots or bases, and combining forms. When we say prefixes, it is a word or letter placed at the beginning, while suffixes, it is a morpheme added at the end. Then the roots or root word, it is the main word. And finally, the combining forms, it is also called a blend or blend words that results from a blending two or more words. For example, sun and flower are two different words, but when fused together, they form another word which is sunflower. So that is combining forms. Structural analysis helps you figure out the pronunciation of an unfamiliar suffixes and roots. Unfamiliar word if that word is composed of familiar word parts such as prefixes, suffixes, and roots. The technique is similar to that used with phonic analysis and synthesis. For example, how would you figure out the pronunciation of italicized word in this sentence? The boss says he is an undependable employee. For structural analysis, break down the word into its parts to isolate the root. For prefix, depend for root word, and able for suffix. If you had met on before and if you had met able before, you should know how to pronounce them. After you have isolated depend, you may recognize it as a familiar word and know how to pronounce it. So in structural synthesis, blend together on, depend, and able. If depend were not a familiar root word, you could apply phonic analysis and after that, blend it together with the prefix on and the suffix able. The next strategy or the fourth strategy is look up the pronunciation in the dictionary. This is useful, but you may not have a dictionary handy. By the time you look up the pronunciation of the word, you may have lost the trend of what you were reading. A dictionary can be used to look at the pronunciation, but there are disadvantages. And that disadvantages is sometimes the dictionary is not handy or not available. Okay, so let's proceed now to the fifth strategy, the context clues. Context refers to the words surrounding a word that can shed light on its meaning. Context can be in the form of definitions, examples, comparisons or contrasts, explanations, and so on, which help us figure out word meanings. This is a word recognition technique, but it does not help us figure out the pronunciation of words. Rather, we use context to help us gain the meaning of a word. Context clues are hints found within a sentence, paragraph, or passage that a reader can use to understand the meanings of new or unfamiliar words. Let's go now to word recognition strategies for word meaning. Your ability to pronounce a word does not guarantee that you will know its meaning. If it is not a part of your oral vocabulary, you would not know what the word means. Since rust is a nonsense word and therefore not part of your vocabulary, you cannot associate any meaning with it. So what technique would you then use to help you unlock words you have never heard of or met before? A most convenient strategy is to ask someone who knows the meaning of the word, but then that someone may not always be available, or you can look up the word's meaning in a dictionary. But these two strategies do not help you figure out the meaning of unfamiliar words independently, as the two strategies described here. So the first strategy is context. By context, we mean the word surrounding a particular word that can help shed light on its meaning. For example, this krill may be old, but I wouldn't wear anything else to the party. From the context of the sentence, you know that the nonsense word krill must somehow refer to an item of clothing, even though you have never met krill before. The context of the sentence does not throw light on it. You know from the word order or position of the word or syntax that krill must be a noun, and words such as where and old and party give you semantic or clues to the meaning of word itself. How about this strategy 2 or the second strategy? It's all about structural analysis and synthesis for word meaning. For example, let's read this sentence. There is a lot of xenophobia among the citizens. From the position of the word xenophobia in the sentence, you know that it is a noun. However, there is not enough information to help you figure out its meaning. Structural analysis is useful when the context clues are not enough and if the word is made up of a number of word parts. Analysis break down xenophobia into its word parts. For example, xeno means stranger or foreign, while phobia means fear or hatred. Notice that structural analysis is a powerful tool, but it depends on your knowledge of word parts and their meanings. In synthesis, put together the word parts and you can conclude that xenophobia means fear of strangers or fear of things that are foreign. Finally, let's proceed now to the comprehension. When we say comprehension, it involves thinking. While we are reading, we should have a comprehension or we should have to comprehend of what we are reading. Because reading comprehension is a complex intellectual process involving many skills. Take a look at this. So to have this skill, which is a comprehension skill, we should have to remember that when we are reading, we should have to understand the context or understanding the context. We have an understanding of the context. Next, weaving ideas and meaning from the context. Weaving ideas, it's all about making or forming ideas from what we are reading. After understanding the context, we should have to understand the context explicitly stated. Meaning, we should have to understand the context in a detailed manner or in a clear stated manner. Next, after understanding the context, we shall now making an inferences about the context or a conclusion of what we are reading. After making an ideas or weaving an ideas or meaning from the context, we will now inferring word meaning from context. In comprehension, we should have to remember about weaving ideas in context. After that, following the structure of the content, then recognizing author's literary methodology, and after following the structure of the content, identify now the author's literary techniques, and then after recognizing the author's literary methodology, proceed now to recognizing author's tone, mood, and purpose. Okay, so all of these are important in order to develop the comprehension skills of our students. Okay, so that's the end of my discussion. Thank you for watching and good day, everyone.